Welcome to another E5 podcast, and I'll introduce my co-host, and it's Mr. Let's start that again, shall we?
Is that me or Dave?
No,
that was
sorry,
me,
I worded that wrong.
Yeah, that was me. But I think Paul wanted me to say my own name all of a sudden.
Yes. I just worded it wrong because I said I'll introduce, which is wrong. I should say, and who am I with today? 5, 4, 3.
Just say who's joined us.
Yeah. Okay, fine. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another E5 podcast. And today, who have I got joining me?
Hello, it's me, David Watts, aka Sparky Ninja, and we've got
Adrian Davey from Brighton.
Adrian Davey, you're back. It's part 2. So we're going to get deeper. We are going to go deeper into this podcasting malarkey, and we're going to talk about a number of issues. More importantly, you have a number of issues you want to talk about or questions you want to ask. So shall we delve straight in?
Okay, well, one of the questions that I'd really like to ask is about the direction of E5, because I kind of get the feeling that a lot of people would like to know exactly where it's all heading and what's the bigger picture.
Oh.
Yeah, all right, Dave, over to you on that one, mate.
I'm just sat here with a beer. Hang on, Paul.
Dave sat here. Go on. What do you think? Where do you think E5 is going, Dave? I have an idea of where it's going, but I don't know whether it's going to go where everybody wants it to go, because a lot of people have got in touch with us. Dave, you can agree with this. Is a lot of people have wanted us to become a competent person scheme. Which, why would I want another CPS kicking around doing the same thing that CPSs do? I work full-time. Dave works full-time. We all work full-time. This is a volunteering collective at the end of the day. So E5 for us, for me, I've always kind of looked at us becoming that formal, social, moral, ethical consciousness of the industry that it doesn't have at the moment. But more importantly, a free enterprise, a non-profit enterprise where the people who want to help E5 will do so in a way which helps support and educate as per our values. Learners, people in the industry, people who want help and support on an individual level. I would like us to become good partners with manufacturers so that we can help give advice and guidance to manufacturers to help them improve the industry. I would eventually like us to maybe sit on committees to help improve the industry. And in all fairness, Dave, Ryan is on the Electrical Safety Roundtable for Social Housing. Mm-hmm. Not many people know this, but I'm the chairman of the other Electrical Safety Roundtable, which is for workplace safety, which is a huge remit. Ryan's very lucky in respects of he's got social housing. For me, workplace safety is a huge one. So I'm chair of that. And we have a number of attendees there, and that's growing. We're looking at doing various campaigns. So for me, E5 is about a load of volunteers getting together and contributing in an informed, in an educated and a very influential way where people can not feel so down about the industry. You know, and I know the industry's in a bad way.
I think the funny thing is, I kind of agree with nearly all of that, but I'm not a committee person. I'm not even professionally registered. I started doing. I started doing Sparky Ninja stuff. The whole background of the term Sparky Ninja. The idea is not me as Sparky Ninja. The idea was through the Part P Select Committee and us observing the lack of effort or interest or passion from all of the CPS organizations and just understanding how they really got to work. Nobody was standing in those committees who was actually standing there for the electricians. And so I don't see myself as a committee kind of person. I may end up getting more involved with that for the greater good kind of thing. But I see myself more as an electrician these days that just can't compete with electricians in the industry because the industry's become so declined with de-skilling, with poor client awareness, saturation of the market, especially the domestic sector. So I started kind of want to do some more work and try to offer what I could. And all I could offer was my technical knowledge because I started to get into training. I got into training before I decided to do any of this. But I realized that the training industry in particular, I think this is why I've become one of the main focal points of E5 is there are huge areas of the industry that are poor. The training industry in particular is very poor. And I think as we've seen more, and again, one of the things, being open and honest, volunteering, we have a lot of people that then have confidence in coming to us. A lot of people on a training journey don't want to talk to their training provider, especially if they're still on that journey, because they feel it might put that journey at risk or it might affect the outcome. Because fundamentally they want to learn, but they're also focusing on a success, which we determine through assessments. But I get a lot of people in my communities who will give me confidence in what their experience, and they'll give me examples. I think I forwarded to you yesterday a guy that's posted to me on Facebook. He's asked his because I did a post on Instagram about a church with surfaced plastic twin and earth.
Saw that.
Yeah. A guy contacts me on Facebook that says our tutor, we're on level 3. He's on level 3, and his tutor refuses to talk to him about MI. He's actually, there's a picture of MI. He refuses to talk about it, to let them handle it, to let them actually know about it. And all they've really said is, oh, FP is better. But all they've covered is PVC, PVC twin and earth, PVC stellar armor, and singles. Not touching it. And these guys come back to me because they know that I'm trying to raise the game with training. And I think that's, if anything, the way E5, the CPS question. But you've looked in. I mean, Adrian, you've looked into how the whole system works. It doesn't really matter if we had another CPS or another CPS. The UCAS model doesn't work.
No.
As far as I'm concerned, I think as far as you're concerned, from what we've discussed before. So it needs something completely different. Now, I've always embraced a license to practice model, something that's purely focused on driving for CPD, something that funds CPD. We don't have that. We still don't have that. So if E5 did anything, it would be in that direction from my perspective. But it would be something completely new, a completely different identity. It would be something that the electricians would actually contribute to deciding the direction. Not, they'd have to contribute. It wouldn't be us close-knit circle. We have to keep the circle closer because we have had a lot of kicks. But yes, we have.
We have, haven't we?
Yeah, we have. Yeah. But the direction, the final direction, it's open to interpretation. We're still learning what E5 is, to be fair.
Well, if I can be honest with you, if I can be honest with you, from an installer's point of view, somebody on the shop floor, you guys have managed to give us all a voice. You've united us together. And it would be great to be able to then use that to push everyone, well, not everyone, but push the industry in the right direction as a unit, and keep people focused on what actually matters, and that is the quality of the work and the installation and looking after the end user.
I think if I think Dave kind of nailed it in his last sentence there. We're still, E5 as an entity is still evolving, and I think it's fair to say, and I'll speak from my experience, there are a lot of people in the industry who actively despise us. You've only got to go on YouTube and look at some of the comments on some of the videos, especially the early stuff that we did while we were emerging, if that's the right term to use. They actively despise us, other than they don't actually want to take the time to understand what our MO is. What motivates us to do what we do. And I always swore blind when I was younger, as I've said previously, that if I was going to do something to help the industry, it couldn't be what the industry currently is, which is way too much bitching, way too much fighting. It's fairly evident from our research, Dave, and let's be honest, this industry is inherently very, very immoral, unethical and corrupt in many parts. The behaviours of individuals do not reflect the corporate entities in a lot of ways. I know a lot of people who work for industry bodies that do some bad things, but that doesn't mean the individuals working for them are. I think
that's a very important thing to note. We have had a lot of people come to us with support, but they cannot publicly support us because of who they work for.
That's very true.
And we can't say who they are, obviously, because of that.
No, and that's kind of sad as well, to be honest, because I've been fortunate enough in my role, because obviously I'm not on the tools much anymore, but in my role, you do become very, and I hate using this term because it's not a term that Sparks use, but you become very strategic, very tactical. So you have to, when you're talking to people, you don't sit and go, "Oh, it goes, yeah, blah blah blah." You're not like that. You've got to be very, very Queen's English, very polite, very restrained in what you say and how you say it, and it almost becomes a tennis game of vocabulary sentences, which is very weird. But growing in the last 8 to 10 years where I've been a client, it's how you have to play that strategic game. But that, in the same breath, I have every sentence I've ever had, and Dave knows this better than most. Every sentence I've ever said, I've got that hairy ass spark still in the back of my brain, sat underneath somebody's cupboard. I'm bending a bit of conduit in a freezing railway depot with no one to help me. I've still got that tattooed traumas in my brain going, whatever I do must make that not happen again. And that for me was one of the drivers for E5, to use a very simple set of principles within a document that's publicly available, and to effectively enhance it, create a brand that isn't monetized, that just is for the right thing and the right reasons. And I'll be honest with you, last night I was on the phone to somebody who said to me, "I've watched you for nearly a year and I've finally sussed out that you guys are the real deal. How do you afford it?" And I just said to him, "I don't. I'm constantly overdrawn and I'm nearly broke, but I do it for the love of doing it. I don't get me wrong, I have a job and I earn enough money, but I don't want money near that brand, because money for me," and loads of people will say, "Shut up, Paul," it just inherently corrupts brands and organizations, and I don't want that near E5.
Absolutely, and I can see that worries people, because the moment that you say that you're not doing it for money, well, people want to know, well, why are you doing it? What is? There's got to be a motive. There's got to be some reason for that.
Yeah.
I was very suspicious in the beginning. It's taken me 3 years to kind of get to the point now where I'm believing what I'm seeing. You guys came down to Steve Willis. You brought that AFDDs with you. Spoke to the learners. They thought you were amazing. They thought, they said to me, these guys are coming with lots of energy. They know their stuff. They're really passionate about what they do. And they really felt privileged by the fact that you'd been there. They all knew who you were before you'd even turned up.
It's kind of weird you say that, because for me, when I first started watching Dave, I used to think, "Oh my God, the man's a walking encyclopedia of knowledge. Oh my God!" And the other day when we were at Alex Dave and we did that presentation together, I looked across the room, and there's a term for wrestling fans when they just mark out, and I totally marked out in my brain. I was going, "Oh my God, oh my God!" It's great. I've always said with E5, when people ask why we do it, I say, 1, society's not in a good place. 2, it's nice to be nice. 3, kindness should never cost anything, because the intent is wrong if it costs something. And there's enough money in our industry to be able to achieve what we need to achieve without money getting in the way. And that's the one thing that we are slowly working out, Dave, is how can we get stuff done using money, but not asking the electricians to pay out for it. They pay out for enough. And that's kind of where we're slowly finding where our feet will be in the industry, where the traction will be. I've said it before, we don't want to be NIC, we don't want to be ECA, we don't want to be NAPIT, we don't want to be SparkSafe. We will find our own place. And at the moment, I think Dave will agree with me, it is literally supporting and educating individuals who care enough to want to step up.
Well, look at this whole thing that you did with the AFDDs, this whole video that you guys have put together. I mean, you went over to who was
Vienna.
it? Vienna. Yeah, and what brand was it?
Eton.
Eton. So you went over to Eton. I mean, you guys have put all that time and effort into it to look into something that the industry has actually put into the regulations. I mean, I don't know whether this is correct or not, but it looks like they've spent no time looking into it before they even decided to put it into the BS 7671. They don't really know anything about it too much, and when people are asking questions, they don't know what to tell us. So you guys have actually gone out of your way, spent time, done the investigation, reported back to the electricians, back to us, and told us exactly what it's all about. Before that, there was nothing.
Yeah, I mean, Dave, when did the DPC come out again? It was like an August 2017, was it? Or before then? I can't remember. I think it was August 2017, because it was a good while ago. Because I remember when it came out, there was no PDF available of it, which was annoying, because immediately, you couldn't print it out or do anything. And then eventually it came out. The day that came out, I was reading that book, as was Dave. And I'm not joking. That draft for public comment was like 800 plus pages, wasn't it?
It was ridiculous, and when we saw, I mean, the mention of the device was in the previous version, but when 62606 was actually then announced, it was just down to us to do our own research. And I think I put my first video out on the subject in the September or October of that year with the draft before the 18th edition came out. But again, as Adrian says, there's no education for electricians.
Nope.
And still there isn't from them. I mean, this is probably the biggest thing we've learned from our AFDD journey, is that the manufacturers were not in any way equipped or capable of properly educating an electrician on how the theory works, so that the clients could then be properly informed. A lot of it was all driven to these stop fires, to insurance and other perspectives than the electricians, who need to understand the protective devices and how they should then be introduced into systems gradually over time.
But surely before something gets put into the regulations, it needs to be tried and tested.
Not necessarily. Well, you'd think so. When the DPC came out, when I started to scribble notes in my old-fashioned way, I decided to copy what Dave does to an extent, because Dave produces fantastic content. So I thought, if you're going to learn something from the DPC, put it in a PowerPoint and use it somehow. So I developed, I think at the time, other than Dave, we developed the first material that basically people could almost bite size off of, and we shared it on Facebook. We shared it, anybody who wanted it. I think I sent out, once we finished reading the DPC, over 100, at least 100 copies of a PowerPoint presentation based on the research we did. Didn't ask anybody for anything. Everyone who came back said, would you like money? Would you like this? And we're like, no. Just grow, develop it, verify for yourself, validate it for yourself. And I remember very clearly the regulation said AFDDs may be used. I remember those words very clearly.
We saw at about the same time frame, we saw that poor marketing image from Eaton, I believe, where they had a banner from either Germany or in Europe where it said that they are mandatory.
That's it. AFDDs are becoming mandatory.
Yeah, and that kind of just immediately just hit this concern within us to actually then just dive straight into investigating.
I think you did a video, Dave, didn't you, straight away?
I
you were mortified. You were angry.
I may have.
Well, one of the things I remember is that video from that advertising campaign from Schneider Electric came out. Do you know, with the dog barking at the kids, and all the fires coming from the low level lamp. That wouldn't be enough to trip out an AFDD anyway on all your research. Yeah,
that was pretty poor form.
And that came out before, information about it.
Yeah, I think one thing that we've learned, and I think we've got to be very careful, is a lot of cynics around it, including there's one industry body who have said they're recommended only, and are very anti-AFDD, because they've made their mind up already, probably because of the early John Ward videos and the fact that we were openly criticising them and saying we don't trust them. Fast forward 6 to 9 months, and we've done the work, and we've come through that journey, that point of understanding where it's all clicked and the jigsaw's all been put together. We've realised that these devices do work in the right application for the right reasons, which is just good basic selection direction. But more importantly, the industry, one of the things, well, this is my big bugbear. When that first came out, the draft public comment, I went to NIC Live, and I was at one of the talks. I was outside the room because they do lots and lots of events. It was a very good show. But I was outside, and I spoke to a certain person who sits on the JPEL, and I said to them, have you done any due diligence on AFDD? And their words were no. And it turned out at that event, I knew more about AFDDs than anybody else in the room. And one person, when they asked a question, and this is a true question, and it was, do AFDDs detect faults upstream? And then the presenter said, yes, they do. And I'm standing in front of 600 plus men going, no, it's not. No, it doesn't. That's just dumb. That's like saying if I have a fault on my toaster, it takes out the national grid. Do you know what I mean? The RCD takes out the grid. Don't be silly. It never works upstream. But that was how poor the research that people had done. And I'll tell you why. Because presenters in our industry and people in our industry were just reading the Siemens documents that were publicly available from Europe, which had been around a few years, and they had no guidance to go on a journey of education or understand that. And me and Dave, we've done the same reading. Me and Dave have spent so many Friday nights, so many Saturday nights reading, but then we've got on the phone and we've bounced off each other our understanding, and then we found more documentation which we've again shared, or Dave's found documents via his contacts, and we've just shared and exchanged this wealth of AFDD information, and it starts back in the American statistics. And the one thing I've learned is the single module AFDD that we have now, you can't compare it to the AFCI that they've got in America. You just can't. Totally different things.
Well, this is what I took away from your AFDD podcast, actually, was that if we forget what's happened previously, the fact that, they suddenly slipped in the last edition, no real research has been done. But if we accept that this is the infancy of this particular technology and that it can only get better from this point on, I think people would have warmed to it a bit better, rather than kind of feeling like they've been tricked into accepting something that wasn't quite ready.
I feel quite privileged the fact that we now know early on, because I remember when RCDs first properly came out in anger and there was so much distrust and all the rest of it. I'm quite glad that independent people who aren't sponsored by manufacturers are able to say, I've seen it work, I've seen the data, I've played around a bit of a rig, I'm reasonably confident. I mean, oh look, Dave's holding one in his hand right now. But we've got access to these devices, and I mean, you yourself have got a board at Steve Willis where you can now validate and verify and prove to your learners that they actually deliver a tangible benefit to the installer, not a bitchy ranty, oh, they don't work, or my area engineers told me they don't work, or I've got a memo that says they don't work, or anything. No, they can see it for their own eyes. They can go on that understanding journey.
But we only have that because of the E5 group.
Yeah, I think one of the things.
I suppose, yeah.
One of the things that we've kind of learned.
Scary, isn't it?
Yeah. One of the things.
But that's what other people are going to be thinking, though. If it wasn't for you, if it wasn't for you guys, we wouldn't be at this point we are now.
Well, in fairness, when we got asked to go to Eaton's factory, I turned around and I just went to my boss and went, right, I'm having some time off work. So I literally booked my annual leave and was like, I'm going to call their bluff now. I'm going to go to Eaton, fix bayonet, and I'm going to prove to them that AFDD don't work. And my God, I got absolutely turned upside down on my head, and so did Mr. Skirm as well. Luckily, Dave didn't actually go, because we never would have fitted in the actual plane seats. They were that small. We never would have. They were tiny. They were literally way too small. But yeah, it was a massive journey of understanding for us. And like with when you're putting a jigsaw together, eventually you get to see the bigger picture. That for us was a bigger picture moment, because we'd done so much research, we had so many valid questions, and we realized that different manufacturers have approached it. As I said previously, the Eaton device was only patented in 2009, so it's really different in its application of electronics and monitoring than the Wilex one.
So do you think this is going to be one of the directions of E5, is actually sort of debunking what we've been told and been put in front of us?
I think the cynical electricians in us always debunk. I mean, it's that trust but verify, isn't it? I've learned long enough now. I mean, I don't know about you, Dave, but I've learned from the lighting industry that lighting industry will sell their own mother to sell you some light fittings. And I have no doubt the rest of the electrical industry is the same. So if you show me a product, fine, show me the benefit, show me the enhancement of safety, show me the value, and show me how it's going to enhance the confidence of electricians, and I will absolutely love it. If it isn't, I will help you fix it and give you honest feedback, as Dave will and John Ward would love to. But yeah, no, that's what we do.
I think that comes with experience, though, doesn't it? Because
yes,
when I first qualified, I trusted that the people in charge of the industry had the industry's interests at heart. They were the people that would light the way and show us the direction, and they had it all covered. All the
there's
bases
no one in charge
covered.
of the industry.
No.
Well, that was us a few years ago. I mean, Paul and I have said about doing another podcast in the future, talking about our old, let's just call it NICIC fanboyism.
Oh yeah,
that's
huge.
I've got all the DVDs. I had all the books. I've still got the books, and a lot of electricians have been put into that. They've been put onto that place where you're there now. We'll talk, you listen, and if you ask anything that is in any way going to nurture further development, we'll say you don't need to know that.
Yeah,
and that's
it's
pretty
true,
much
that's
where
what
it's been
happens.
for 10 years. And what we found with this journey, especially with AFDDs, is what probably was more shocking for us is that the fact that different manufacturers had approached it differently, and they'd actually had different opinions, different approaches. They were going to produce different things for the market. And I'll just go with CPS. Everyone's involved with this. There wasn't any strong support from any of them individually on the AFDD subject itself. There was a lot of reliance on manufacturers, but a lot of the manufacturers still today are strongly just talking about SPDs at these talks. AFDDs, I think they've kind of given up on AFDDs for this current price point, and they're not really talking about them right now. They're talking about SPDs still.
It will, like knowledge in our industry filters slowly. It always does. The difference is between when we were younger, 20 years ago, still on the tools, and now is guys can sit in their vans and have direct contact with thousands of electricians on social media, tons of YouTube content. I mean, even I watch videos where Dave Savory will be installing something, and I'll go, one, I've never installed that. Two, that's really freaking handy to know. And three, I'm going to do that when I do my outside lights or do my garden lights. So I now know where to go and get updates of my install knowledge, because I'm not on the tools anymore, from various YouTube people who I trust and respect, and not the ones who are idiots.
Plus, with all these different platforms, you can actually, a lot of guys can actually go to different communities until they find the one that is suitable for them.
Yeah.
As well. It's like, I mean, we've got the Instagram for the E5 Instagram, which is just for code breaking, basically.
Yeah, it is.
I've got my Discord, which I don't push around too much because I've got a really nice small community in there.
Yeah.
There's code breaking in there. There's machinery. There's so much great discussions in there. Mr. Skirm is a very regular place. If you land in a place where there's a Paul Skirm hanging around all day, and Mr. John Ward, where else would you want to go to than be in presence of people like that? You see, and so we don't have to always get on the NIC tech line or the NAPIT tech line, or think about what we can remember, or just wing it. We can actually seek technical knowledge and information from a huge variety of people now.
Well, I'm new to all this podcast stuff, and actually listening to podcasts. And one of the things I like about it is I can Bluetooth it to my car stereo now and listen to it on the way into work, which is actually quite, I find myself talking along to it. And from the judging by the Twitter, a lot of people do the same thing. So, I mean, the fact that you guys are doing this podcast is also a way that you can keep us up to date with what's going on in the industry.
So hang on a second. So just to be clear on the podcaster thing. So I'm new to the podcast and all this technology as well. Dave is the originator of the podcast. Dave has a Sparky Ninja podcast.
I am,
Dave has been doing it long before anybody else was doing podcasts.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we discussed ages ago of all the various platforms, because I'm not heavily competent on forms of social media like Instagram. I'm learning it because I just work such long hours, so it's very difficult. But Dave started it, and we spoke ages and ages ago about would we do podcasts, would we do YouTube videos, how would it work? And I think organically, after we went on the EGTE stuff, we realized actually, I think you said it, Dave, why don't we just record what we talk about? That's pretty much would be a podcast. And then that was it, pretty much.
We have so many discussions as a group within E5, which so many people would learn from and, would be able to contribute to as well. Yeah. And I think the podcast is probably one of the most rawest resources that we have because like Adrian now, anyone can have a voice and anyone can jump on and actually host a podcast.
Yeah, because it's free. This is free to do. The only thing you're giving up is your time. And my view is with the time I've been spending at work recently, it's invaluable for me because if I get to share my knowledge with my peers and Sparks in their vans, hello to anyone in their vans, it's great. But as Dave said, we have these conversations all the time, like me and John Ward. When we did our first podcast together, that was me and John just talking, but recording what we talk about. So it was very organic and very natural. When Dempsey's on the podcast, I just spend most of it taking the piss out of him, in all fairness, because that's what I generally do. But we've all got our own dynamics, and we always swore that anybody who came on the podcast would never be a guest. It'd be a co-host, because this isn't. If it's going to be an E5 podcast, it's owned by everybody, because at some point Dave is going to do a multi-podcast series on the state of the training industry, and I'm sure at some point it's going to be a 4 or 5-parter where he literally explains everything and just rants and puts the world to rights. And that may have me hosting one of them, John Ward hosting it, Paul Skirm talking to him about it, Dan talking about it, and the dynamics, it literally is who's free, who's got subject matter to talk about.
And to be honest, comparing to other things that we do, I mean, like when we went down to Steve Willis or Alex, I mean, we spend money on hotels, on fuel. We're also giving our time up. Here we're giving our time up. Everything else is free.
Yeah.
Hosting and sending. It's like I did the 18th edition course on YouTube and the design courses and stuff, all free, up it goes. But then people said, can you put it onto a podcast? Just rip it up. I went, really? You want to listen to that on your way to work? But people do. And I had a guy today ask me if I'd done it. I said, oh, you've not noticed I do have a podcast. There it is. And he's just thanked me this afternoon. People want to, as you say, Adrian, people want to hear Sparky talk, Sparky chat on their time.
I'm going to sound really weird here, but for the last 12 weeks that we've been doing this, every chance I get now, rather than listening to music on the way to work, I am listening to a podcast, whether it's I've got Dave in my ear or AGT in my ear or somebody else talking, or even verifying our ones, because when we record these, we have access to them before the general public do. So Dave will listen to them, or I will listen to them just to sense check that because I have edited a few poorly and left huge gaps out. So we upload them and then just leave them sitting for weekly release, which this week we'll get a whole nother batch done for the Christmas and New Year period. So,
yeah. Well, if I can pull you back to the training as well,
yes.
quickly.
Go for it.
Because I'm quite glad that you're here, actually, David. I'm starting to notice a lot of holes in the training industry, and I have to be very careful what I say, obviously, with my new job and stuff like that. But I have a confession to make, and I only found this out thanks to Paul, that it turns out that I'm not actually qualified. 15 years ago, I went to Brighton MET. I turned up every single day, didn't miss anything. I was kind of felt like I was top of the class. And then, finished my time, got all these certificates in the post, didn't know what any of them meant, just assumed that was the right stuff that I'd been sent. Finished, shook everyone's hand as I left, never heard another peep out of them. Got registered with the NIC, because that was literally a year later, Part P came out, got registered with the NIC. They didn't say anything about the certificates that I had. 15 years later, with a chance conversation with Paul, after I'd got my job at Steve Willis, he was telling me that a lot of people in the industry have got these certificates, but not actually all the modules are complete. And it reminded me of a time when I did the 17th edition update, which was at Steve Willis. They said, oh, you haven't got all the modules. So I showed them all my certificates. The guy went away, came back again. They said, no, it's okay. You've got everything you need, apart from you haven't got the final certificate. But you can do the 17th edition update. So I did that. And then it got me thinking about what Paul said. So I went back, checked them again. It turns out that I've got electrical science and principles module missing. So without that, I'm not actually qualified.
Is this why you're a kitchen fitter?
This is why I'm a kitchen fitter.
This is why you're a kitchen fitter. I remember anyone remembers the last podcast, Adrian's confession. I didn't realise that we were going to allow kitchen fitters onto these podcasts. So please apologise. Please allow me to abuse you a little bit longer. You're a kitchen fitter. Anyway, moving on.
I heard that podcast, and I have to say, without you saying who your training provider was for that, whoever it was who provided with that kitchen fitter training didn't effectively do their RPL or look at your background. No.
What's an RPL, Dave? Sorry,
recognized prior learning.
Ooh.
Anyone who goes onto a training journey the training provider must assess the learner's suitability for the training journey. This means the level they're going to sit on and the level of assessment at the end of the journey. But to go on to that journey, they have to either be suitable for that level or not be beyond that level. You're not supposed to bring someone back down to a level they're already on, and you're not supposed to put somebody up to a level they haven't reached yet. There was a guy who contacted me from Facebook not long ago. He had an issue or a complaint with a company doing their 5-week thing, and as a way to reimburse, they threw him for a 32396. And this guy's doing level 2 stuff. He's done a 32396, so he's now being leveled up to level 4. And now he's having problems with his level 3 project because he's over-engineering his design. He came up to me at LX and spoke to me. Jeez. You know, for most training companies, these qualifications, these learners, it's just product off a shelf, So bums on seats.
If you don't mind me chipping in, so just for those listening who are wondering what the hell we're talking about, so in your city and guild certificates, which I'll go back to the start of the story. So when I brought SparkSafe over for my railway, and I got to meet Mr. Derek Thompson, who's an absolute diamond of a chap. And because my family from Northern Ireland, I went over to Northern Ireland. Again, I paid for it, by the way, in case anybody's wondering. And I stayed with my dad. And while I was at the SparkSafe Centre, I did my 18th edition course. And we went through how SparkSafe works in incredible detail. And one of the things that we spoke about was how they identify fake city and guilds, because as it stood, the JIB didn't identify fake city and guilds. In fact, you can actually go on the dark web, which we know exists because I've done anti-terrorist training, and apparently it's where you can buy bomb making manuals and stuff. But on the dark web, you can go onto a site and print out fake city and guilds. Now, the guys at SparkSafe had a two-layer system for checking whether qualifications were valid, and it was a very small comment because I gave them my certificates just to add to their pool of templates, not that they needed them, just to see if there's anything dodgy about me or my training in Tottenham. And it was a flippant comment where he said the amount of blokes who are not fully qualified because they're missing modules. And I went, pardon? And then I got then told that there are lots and lots of guys who, when they go through the SparkSafe checks, they will turn around to them and say they're missing a module. And because they're missing the module, they don't get the full award certificate. So those who have got a Part 1 or a Part 2 certificate, you get 2 modules and 1 certificate, 2 modules and another certificate, and then you get a 3rd certificate. And that's normally the City and Guild Award or the NVQ Award. It's a separate sheet. But a lot of Sparks since then, which have gone through the process, have been missing modules, including some of the guys who work on my railway. So there are qualified gold card holding Sparks of over 15 years who can't get qualified electrician license to practice because they're not actually fully qualified as per the standards. But nobody checked it.
Well, this turns out that it seems like it's quite a known problem, because I called City and Guilds, complained about it. They said that they're all fully aware that this happens. And then there was a Brian Scadden thing that came up on Twitter for I'm trying to remember what it's called now, like the old school rights type thing. I'm trying to remember the exact name for it. Grandfather rights type thing that came up. Yeah. So I called them and told him my story. And again, they said this is a known thing. There's quite a few people out there that have exactly the same problem.
Yeah, it's a mature candidate assessment.
Yeah, that's it. So it's actually it's well known within the industry, but it doesn't sound like anybody's actually addressing the problem or doing anything about it.
But surely, Dave, this is the next. I know I'm probably being dramatic. This is like the next PPI scandal, but within our industry. This is people who, in good faith, have gone to colleges to get fully qualified to a framework written by a combination of Unite the Union and the JIB, and have left thinking they're fully qualified and are not fully qualified. And this is where this license to practice, when it gets implemented, I'm the first in the UK to do it in a team of electricians. And this is one of the challenges that we had, whereas we had guys who became restricted, because obviously there's apprentice electrician, restricted electrical worker and qualified electrician. They've obviously got down to qualified and assessed. But the qualified electrician guys weren't getting it. They were getting restricted electrical worker because they weren't fully qualified. They didn't have the full qualifications, and guys were coming to me and going, what can I do? And I was like, well, go and get fully qualified in line with industry requirements.
The problem is they won't go back because they're always going forwards. And the problem with using the term fully qualified is that suggests a date. About, I don't know, 7 or so years ago, maybe longer, environmental legislation came in as an additional unit to those training outcomes. And when that came in, it meant everybody who had trained prior to that didn't have environmental legislation as a unit. Suddenly there were two separate branches. And then as we have new technologies coming out, we have more branches coming in. And so, you know, it's the term fully qualified, well, it's not something that you could really kind of restore anymore. Because again, I mean, look at all these different, we talk about CPD, we talk about all the different training journeys. If you call these, and again, when I see people at work and they go, oh, he's fully qualified, you know, remember, competence is obviously with regards to relative to the nature of the work under Regulation 16. So qualified doesn't mean competent. So relying on the term fully qualified as an established level of success or completion has to be, you have to be very careful with that. Yeah. There was I had the exact same issue with my training college, who I shouldn't name, Bracknell Wokingham College. I will, I don't care. The assessor was a lazy bastard. He was actually a fire marshal, wasn't of electrical bias. And when it came to the completion, there was a cock up. I did the MVQ level 3 portfolio and I did an AM2 assessment, but there was issue with the paper. It took me years to sort that out. And there was I'm sure there's a module missing with mine, to be honest. Well, I haven't looked because I haven't had to look at my qualifications for donkeys.
Well, for me to sort this out, the 2360 parts 1 and 2 that I did don't exist anymore. So I've now got to do the 2357, I think it is. So I've got the environmental exam to do. I've got the 2396 testing to do, which would help me get the qualification. And then I've got to do a portfolio and then the AM2. Yeah.
I know that if I was to kind of try and get a gold card and badge it all up now, I'd probably have to go down that avenue with the portfolio. I'd have to get that redone, I think.
Well, I'm actually going to do it because it means a lot to me to be qualified.
It does, yeah. It does. For me, it's I spend most of my life trying to assess competence out of workers and competence out of people, and it's basically a line that keeps moving.
I think there's a generational problem with electrical qualifications as well. When I qualified in the mid to late 90s, there was a massive problem because there was only 2 places in the entire UK that did AM2 assessments.
That's the problem I had because I was in Bracknell and the place was in Southampton.
Yeah, no, when it was, I think it was an 18-month waiting list. So I went to my employer. It was a JIB registered apprenticeship, and I went to my employer and basically said to them, "Look, I've got 18 months to wait." So I was due to come out of my time, and my employer went, "Oh, well, don't worry about it. We'll see. We'll ring them back in a couple of months and see if it's got any shorter." Because we weren't going to book 18 months because that was just stupid. I was being planned to do other stuff. And I ended up starting, I was running jobs. And before you knew it, after about a year and a half, I was off the tools. I was site engineering. I didn't need to do the assessment. I weren't, going back on the tools anytime. And I was supervising men and it just sort of drifted. And then obviously you go back on the tools and it's not needed on certain jobs. And it was never a thing. And then eventually, very quickly, I went into this role at EDF where I was the NICQS. That was when I was a fanboy. And all of a sudden, my employer said, "Oh, you need the JRB card." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And I applied for it and I got a labourer's card. So I ended up going, "Well, what the hell's this?" And in the end, the managing director for EDF wrote to the JRB. And next thing you know, I got my gold card straight away.
So I've never had to apply for one because I work for a family firm. And by the time I did my level 3 or the 3rd year, I was running jobs. I went straight from finishing in the July to the September. I did my 2391 with a great trainer. So I did my 2391 straight away after level 3. Sailed through that, and my old man was like, "You don't need to send you away for this or wait for this." I did one assessment. They cocked it up. They said they had to redo it, and there was a wait period. And he said, "Don't bother." It wasn't needed, and I just carried on with I carried on progressing from there. But there was a huge balls up with timelines, waiting periods. There was only 2 or 3 centers that ran it. That was about 2000, year 2000, I think, 1999, 2000.
Yeah, it wasn't accessible. It wasn't accessible as a completer, and that's the trouble. There's never been the accessibility to the training that based on the demand and the guys coming in and out. I mean, getting an apprenticeship with JTL was a non-starter. I went via agencies. I'd never heard of an agency. I went via well, I started off with a family company in Camden, and I had to go agency, but getting into the industry, there's never been a solution to it. There's never been a one funnel direct this way. There's never been a proper real, well, there was a framework and then it kind of all got changed. And for some weird reason, Dave, you'll tell me if I'm wrong here, the 2391 got split into almost 3 courses.
It got split into 2394 and 2395.
Why?
A number of years ago. Because apparently the industry wanted emphasis on the differences between initial verification and periodic inspection and testing. Because the original 2391 didn't have any distinction between the two.
Jesus Christ.
The argument was, I mean, you had the 2392, which was aimed for obviously the domestic scope, and level 3 electricians on the 2365 did inspection and testing in their 3rd year. So they would only need to do the 239, the periodic. Does that make sense? So they've done initial verification within their 2365. So they don't need, I said earlier on, you should not be retrained on a level that you've already done. You should not retrain on a subject you've already covered. So they shouldn't say you must do inspection and testing and cover initial verification if you've already done that within the level 3 of your 2365. So that's why they split it. And that's why there then became the 2395 after your level 3 2365. And if you've not done a 2365 and you wanted commercial initial verification, they had the 2394. They still have that now, but they've brought the 2391 numbers back with the 5051 and 52.
The trouble is, Dave, as an employer, when you go through at your generation of training, you're used to, have you got your A, B, and C course, your part 1, 2, or 3, depending on what your age, or your 2330 electrotechnical MVQ3. It's a nightmare. It really is for site managers and people to try and understand where these competencies are.
I've got a slide. When I do competence assessments and I deliver electrical champions training, one of the things I have to really cover, we talked about this briefly the other day, was procurement, was things like the Safe Contractor Scheme, things like all these badges and all these other accreditations. And then I have a slide which has all of the 2382, so the 2382 10, 12, 20, 15, and the 18. And it has 2393, the 2394, the 2395, the 2396, the 2397, the 2382, the 2377, the 237732, the 237722. All of these are city and guild qualifications, and they are, for the majority of them, 1, 2, 3, maybe 4-day courses. And so these learners are going through training companies that are factories of qualifications, and they're coming out with a pile of half a dozen, maybe more, city and guild level 3 qualifications. And when you look at those and you flick through them, a lot of employers don't even know what they really mean.
Well, I've got 16 city and guilds in total, covering the whole breadth of comms, fibre, electrical, PV, all of the bits of paper. I've got 16 pages of certificates just for my electrical. And you're right, I've handed over, when I've joined companies, they were always my fundamental underpinning qualification. When I handed them over to an employer, they'd look at them and go, I even once, when I was doing some auditing, I wrote a standard called Competency of Electricians, and I did a little framework map thing, which I spoke to City and Guilds, researched the standards, researched qualifications, and allowed managers, employee managers, to kind of make an assessment as to whether they met an underpinning competence, they were developing, they were at the competence level, they were at an enhanced competence level or technician, and they could just tick a box and recognise the number. But it got to a point where it actually went into London Underground, and the at the time head of electrical turned around and he said, "You're going to make us all look incompetent if we agree to that." And I was like, but hang on, that's the industry standards. And that's another difficult conversation the industry won't have. The reason why there is so much bad work out there is not one voluntary regulatory body or CPS will have an open and public and frank conversation about the really, really crappy state of workmanship, skills, and underpinning competence of electricians that are practicing out there. Our Instagram is a
they won't because
of coding.
They won't because they're wearing their badges.
Yes.
Yeah. So,
And that's a time-based pressure thing, Adrian.
Mm.
That's just something we've got to work on over time.
Something else I've noticed, and I hope I'm right in quoting this as well, is that there are a lot of training providers out there that offer City and Guilds qualifications. But when you actually search City and Guilds for those qualification numbers, they don't exist.
those
when
are
Ooh.
accredited programs most often.
Yeah, so they've been created by that training provider.
Yeah, I'll give you a little bit of a history with this from me. Obviously, I do some very close training with my father in his college, Ascot College. We have a very, very we have a lot of experience with one of the subjects of the BS 7909, which is like I've just been doing this week, which is the do you know what BS 7909 is, Adrian?
Yes, a temporary
Yeah,
installation.
the temporary events, right? Great. So we did a lot of work with that from our old work history with Ask Race course and a bit of training and beyond. And about it must be 10 years or so now, we had interest from one of the main event companies for a qualification to be developed, and we went to City and Guilds about the idea of them creating the qualification. We could assist with writing it, and they basically got to that point where we went, "There's not enough demand for it, so we're not going to do the work." But we've done some work with you. We've already, you're already in a training company under our strict systems of quality control and external quality assurance. So if you pay us a certain amount of money, you can then use our badge under a specific criteria. And so, yeah, £8,000 handed over. A site visit from somebody who wasn't of technical bias, but just assessed the delivery set. And then an email sent for the extra material to somebody who was of level technical knowledge. And we could put that qualification on as an accredited program. But here are the strict things. The qualification number must not be similar to a City and Guild number. Yeah. So if we wanted to call it, for example, the 7909-1, 7909-2, they said no, because they have the 2382. They have the number systems. So we were told no. So we had to call it the A course, the B course, the C course. And the certificate mustn't look like a City and Guild certificate. So those were the strict things. We could use the badge, City and Guild accredited, but we had certain other things that we must not do. Okay, fine. But then after a couple of years, other companies started to do similar. And, more and more companies are doing this now, loads of them. And then some companies, some very big ones, created the domestic practical training experience, the 5-day training experience. And they have a number that is very similar to a City and Guild number, but it's an accredited training program. And now I have spoken to City and Guilds about this before, and they apparently have changed their thought process on how they do it since we were brought in. So in other words, they're just basically raking it in, and the numbers have been adjusted, and they've been very lenient. And now these accredited training programs, I'm not going to say being given out like sweets, but they are being very, very free. And we were actually told when we first set up, we were told that we'd have exclusivity to that subject, which is why I was incredibly frustrated when a CPS had announced that they were the first to do this, completely ignoring the fact or not knowing the fact that we had done this. So I had the CEO on the phone to me about it, and I basically just hung up on him because I was just pissed off. But yeah, so
well, the frustrating thing is with all this is that I'm looking at one now. I won't name any names, but there's basically days 1 to 5. You do their accredited course, which is an electrical installation work within a domestic dwelling.
Yeah.
Days 6 to 10, you do the City and Guilds 2393, which is just a Part P building regulations course.
Yeah,
I think
20 questions.
Yes. 20 questions, multiple
level
choice.
3, 20 questions, multiple choice.
And 60% pass rate.
Yeah.
Then
so my mum could pass that.
Yeah. Yep. Well, days 11 to 15.
Just so you know, I've delivered that course. I've been finished by 11 o'clock.
Fuck off.
Seriously.
So days 11 to 15 is the City and Guilds 2392, which is an inspection testing course. And then days 16 to 18 is the 2382 wiring regulations, latest amendments. And that's it.
That's a package of short course City and Guilds.
Yeah.
And what's missing is the domestic. Now, when I worked for a company like this, they had something called basic electrics. 3 days of basic, 2 days of introduction to inspection and testing. That's a scary thought. Okay. And we had slides with pictures of saddles and cleats and cables, and that's part of a package. And then one of the biggest culprits, obviously, is an awarding body that have a Part P DEI full scope course. That's the Logic one, which you see with a lot of these organizations. But this other company wanted to keep it City and Guilds for as much as they could. So they created this other number that you're seeing, but you can't find it when you search for it.
No.
It's an accredited program that's not searchable on the public register, and it's not supposed to have that kind of number system, but it does. And when I spoke to City and Guilds about it once, they went, oh. Obviously,
So-
money has spoken in that sense. What I must say is I have consulted with City and Guilds as a qualification developer, and when I've done that, an employee from this exact company has joined in and also consults, so they are very closely affiliated with the guilds.
But as an employer, I wouldn't recognise some sort of accredited course unless it's City and Guilds or EAL. I'm going to turn around and somebody gives me something and says, "Oh, here's my diploma in electrotechnical." I'm going to go, "Is it a City and Guild? Is it an MVQ? Is it EAL award?"
You're an employer, Paul. These people aren't looking for employers. These are people looking to register with the CPSs.
Well, it actually says in the blurb that most people that take this course go on to be self-employed.
Yeah.
Well, God help any who actually go employed after being self-employed, because then they're going to find they're going to hit a brick wall if they ever go employed.
Something else I came across the other day as well is a Logic certification. It actually had only a 5-year shelf life.
Yes, that's copied. That's copied over because the Logic's origin is plumbing and heating. Logic is originally from plumbing and heating place, and when Part P came in, which brought in this issue of potentially plumbers needing some electrical training, earthing and bonding for gas, they started dipping their toe in. The guy from there is called Phil Williams. He was the technical dude who did all of the arrangement there. They started dipping their toe into the electrical subjects, and then they took in the defined scope, but then they just dived head first into full scope, and they created this. Now, they as a company were very strict in that the PowerPoint presentation was read-only format, and they gave me they gave the company I worked for the PowerPoint. They created the training material, they created the assessment material, and they did provide CPD because a lot of people needed it for trainers, but the standard of the training material, I have shown some of the guys in the 5, it's originally theirs, and it is piss poor. Yeah, so that's an awarding body. But what you need to know is the awarding body is also a training company. Yeah, they have obviously you have Logic, and then you have Logic for training. So they are heavily invested in like.
So there's no conflict of interest there.
Not at all. Not at all.
Blimey, lads. So we're at that mark again where I think we need to wind this down, but I think we should take this into another podcast. So lads, I'm going to ask you to come back and do another one, because I think we've more to talk about training in the industry and the role of an electrician. So let's leave this for now and let's take this into another podcast. So I think I'm going to thank you both for being on this one. Thank you very much.
Cool. It's been fun. Cheers, Adrian. Cheers, Paul.
Thank you very much for listening, everybody, and take care of yourself and each other.
Bye.